Kritika, we are live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Ask Me Anything session with Abhiraj Singh Bhal, who is the co-founder of Urban Company, previously known as Urban Clap. Thank you, Abhiraj, for sparing your precious time and volunteering to help our entrepreneurs in this difficult time. For our
My
audience, the
pleasure.
structure, yeah, would you? Okay, so for our audience, the structure of the session remains the same as the previous sessions. We have shared a list of questions that we received from you people with Abhiraj, which I would take up one by one, and he would answer them to the best of his capacity. And post which we shall take up the questions from live audience. So if you have any queries, just keep dropping them in the comment section of whatever platform you have logged in from, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we will pick them from there. Over to you, Adhiraj, if you want to address the audience before we start taking the questions.
Thank you very much, Kritika. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I think these are obviously challenging times for the entire ecosystem, but at the same time, I think in any challenge lies an opportunity, and through the remainder of the hour, what uh, my basic theme will be is how do we stay positive and upbeat, and really bring the best out of us during these challenging times. As the cliche goes, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So I think that's going to be the broad theme for me in this talk.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So let's begin with the questions that we have received. The first question that we have from Meera is, we are hearing a lot about this new normal to survive along with the COVID-19. Your firm is completely based on human to human interaction. What are the challenges for your firm to prepare for this new normal, and how are you preparing for the post-COVID world?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Before I answer that question, maybe Kritika, after you ask the question, you can go on mute because otherwise my voice will echo.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Thank you. So yeah. So I think the basic view that I would like to share with all our entrepreneur friends is that it takes about 10 to 15 years in any country, particularly in India, to build a large and impactful business. That's the normal duration of time that it takes to build a high quality company or business. And you are never going to have a 10 to 15-year linear upward journey. That's just not going to happen. If you look at history, uh, the last financial crisis that happened in 2008. The dot-com bust happened in 2001. Towards the late 80s, we had the Asian crisis, and in 1991, India underwent liberalization. So every 10 to 12 years, there will be a structural shock in our economy in some shape and form, and that's just the nature of it. So it's very important that whenever we go through these crises and whenever we go through these structural shocks, A, we recognize that we are in a crisis and a structural shock, and B, we are mentally prepared to ride it out, because that's inherent to entrepreneurship and that's inherent to building a large company. The fact, or building any business for that matter, the fact that every 8, 10, 12 years we will hit a recession, we will hit a crisis, and then we have to really really stay strong during that period. The other point that I would make is, with any crisis, it takes time for things to sort out. And you know I was still graduating from college in the 2008 crisis that happened, but I can tell you that by the time things started to feel normal again, it was 2010, 2011. If you talk to people who were in the midst of the 2001 crisis, they will tell you that by the time things started to feel normal again, it was 2003. So typically it takes a little bit longer for things to go back to normal than we assume. And part of the reason is we think it's going to be quick. It's a 3 month thing, it's a 6 month thing, but the core of the crisis might be 3 or 6 months long. In this case, the core of the crisis is COVID. And hopefully, in the next 6 to maximum 12 months, it'll be behind us. But the second order and third order impact of that crisis lives on for longer. And people's scars take time to heal. So the duration of the crisis on an average can actually last much longer than the core of the crisis itself. And therefore, we should mentally be ready for a much longer duration to fight it out. Coming to how urban companies thinking about it, uh, this crisis is at the heart of at some level, social distancing is the new norm, and urban companies, as somebody rightly mentioned, it's a human to human service, right? So what we've done in response to this crisis is put in place lots of safety protocols which ensure maximum social distancing when our services are delivered, and also ensure that our users but also service professionals are as safe as possible. There's obviously nothing like 100% safe anymore, but as safe as possible. We've mandated the use of masks, gloves, sanitizers, and now face shields for all our service professionals. The SOP requires them to change the mask and the glove with every single service. We've mandated the use of the Arogya Setu app. And in case your status on the Arogya Setu app is not safe, you're not allowed to deliver services. We have geofenced at the back end all containment zones, so nobody inside a containment zone can book a service, and no service professional inside a containment zone can go out and deliver services. That's another step we've taken. We do daily temperature checks for all our service partners every day. If at all the reading goes above 99, then they are blocked from serving orders. They're also put on a telemedicine consultation. And if the doctor prescribes, then we also get them COVID tested. And if that COVID test is positive, then we have an health insurance and an income protection plan for all our service partners up till July 2021. So they get paid sick leave. They also get paid to stay at home. And this ensures that no sick service professional keeps going out. Because one of the things we learned from previous pandemics is that informal economy workers and gig workers, as they are known, continue to work through the pandemic, even if they have symptoms of falling sick, because they feel that if they don't, they'll lose their earnings. So, Urban Company has put in place probably the first of its kind paid sick leave program in the entire gig ecosystem all over the world. We mandated the use of only single use disposable and sachet products in our beauty services. In our home services, we've trained everybody to follow hygiene standards, maintain social distancing. A bunch of things we've done. And I'm sure all of you are doing this in your respective businesses, because that's the new normal. The new normal requires us to reimagine how our businesses have to be delivered. But the only thing I'd like to tell all of you is, despite our best efforts, it will take time for things to come back to normal. And we have to be patient, and we have to do the right thing in whichever field we operate in, which is to really, really focus on hygiene, really focus on safety. More than a business crisis, this is also a humanitarian crisis. And therefore, responding with empathy towards our customers, towards our service professionals, towards our suppliers is extremely critical.
Thank you, Abhiraj. I think you have answered in entirety more than what the question asked. The second question is from Rajesh, who asks, in a world where marketing or branding is treated as a percentage spend of revenue, how does one go about spending on building a brand without risking the business model, especially a startup?
For that's a very good question, and my recommendation to startups, sort of very strong recommendation to startups, is that in the first 5 years of your operation, first 4 5 years, your brand is basically your product or your service. They're the same thing. They're not different things. They're not, um, they're interchangeable. People remember Urban Company's brand because of the service experience that the service professional delivers them, not because of some very fancy brand campaign that we've done. You know, so in the first 4 to 5 years, focus on user acquisition. So all your marketing should focus on getting new customers, be it B2B customers, B2C customers, whoever are your customers. Your marketing should be very sharply focused on getting new customers, ensuring that every dollar spent has a strong ROI. And then branding will happen because of the product or the service that you offer, not because of some fancy campaign or some film star that you get, etc. You can maybe focus on it once your company has crossed the 5 year mark and has become a large business, as few hundred crores maybe in revenue. But in the first 4 to 5 years, your brand is synonymous with your product or your service. Your product or your service is your brand. Your entire focus should be on making a great product and or a great service, because that will set the precedence for a great brand. And all your marketing should be focused on only ROI driven customer acquisition.
Our next question is from Soumya, who asks, will this be a right time to start a business? And which sectors will grow after the pandemic ends?
So, number one, I think there's no right time to start a business. The right time to start a business is when you feel confident to start a business, and when you feel like you should go out there and build a strong company. And hopefully you have a good idea as well. But idea is not always very important, and I can talk about that separately. I think any time is a good time to start a business. In fact, recessions are sometimes the best times to start a business because competitiveness in the market is low, and a lot of existing businesses are going out of business. So overall, it's actually a good time to start. And history teaches us again that some of the best businesses have started in recessions. Which sectors will grow after the pandemic ends? Look, my view is that when um, and this is slightly contrarian view to what most people believe. I think human behavior takes a lot of time to change. And I think it's not very easy to change human behavior. So I know there's a lot of conversation today around this is going to be the new normal and this is going to be the new normal and so on and so forth. I don't think it's very easy to establish new normals. So I have a simple framework of looking at it. If something was anyways going to happen, right? If something was inevitable, then that will get accelerated. So video conferencing, for example, it was always going to be an inevitable thing, and now in hindsight it seems obvious, but there've been sort of papers written on this earlier, as way back as 25 years back, where people say, what's the point in catching a flight and going and meeting somebody for an hour if a video conferencing experience can co-create 80 to 90% of that. So video conferencing replaces part of our business interaction was an eventuality that was anyways going to happen. This pandemic has accelerated it. E-commerce adoption, because it's just significantly easier to open your phone and order something versus going to a nearby mall or a nearby market and then finding it. Selection may not be as much, price may not be the best, you don't have reviews when you look at a product in a shop, etc., etc. Was anyway something that was going to happen. The pandemic will accelerate. So there will be certain behaviors that the pandemic will accelerate. But I don't think, for business owners, a good way to think about what business to start is, hey, what is this environment? In this environment, what's a good business to start? Because you're building the business for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And the pandemic will hopefully end in the next 12, 18 months, right? I also don't think it's a good way to think about, hey, what is this pandemic going to accelerate? Because again, you won't think from first principles, you'll think from very convoluted ways. So my simple recommendation is, if you're starting a business, start with an idea that's going to be relevant even after the pandemic goes away. It's just going to be a very product or a service is just a very strong need regardless of the pandemic. And if the pandemic accelerates it, great. But even if the pandemic doesn't accelerate it, it's still fine. Like, for example, if somebody has a great idea in travel, I would totally encourage you to start it even now, because eventually the pandemic will end and travel will resume, and you will have a slower start, you learn a lot about people's behavior. And once the pandemic is behind you, you can accelerate, and lots of travel businesses would have gone out of business. So you'll probably have tailwinds at that point of time. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to focus on, what is the right business opportunity in this pandemic, as much as what is the right business opportunity in general.
That makes a lot of sense, Abhiraj. The next question we have again is very pertinent to urban company. Pooja asks, trust is very important in your line of field, and urban company has been able to develop it in a very effective manner, especially in tier one cities. But with current needs of contactless delivery of services, there is a need to build that trust again. How are you going about this?
It's a very relevant question, and I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, our entire endeavor to rebuild trust and confidence is focused on two things. One is the quality of the service itself, which continues to be very important, probably more important now than ever before. And we have increased our bar on training, we have increased our bar on quality control, we've increased our bar on selection, etc., etc. And we are fortunate that this pandemic has accelerated the number of applications we get from service professionals. And so we can choose, because many of them have unfortunately lost their jobs in the outside world. To the second point, the second pillar of trust is really now, all the safety measures that we have to take. Earlier, safety used to be related to ensuring that no untoward incident happens in the marketplace. But now safety has a whole new meaning. Safety is about ensuring that everybody is wearing a new mask and a new glove with every service. Safety is about ensuring that wherever possible in our services like plumbing, carpentry, AC repair, refrigerator, 6 feet distance is being maintained. Safety is about doing daily temperature checks to ensure that no person who has temperature goes. Safety is about putting a paid sick leave program for service partners. Safety is about giving them face shields. We are also sending face shields to our customers in beauty now. In our beauty services, we are mailing face shields to our power users and telling them that whenever you use Urban Company again, please wear this face shield apart from your mask, because it's important for you. Face shield safety is about ensuring that we use disposables in beauty, and we sanitize all the tools, and we only use single use sachet products and not bottles, so that there's no cross contamination. So all of those things, I think, and like I said earlier, com- consumers who use the service and even others who don't use will see, when a brand sincerely makes efforts to invest in quality, to invest in hygiene, and to invest in safety, consumers know it and they can see it. And it will remain in their minds even if they use it again and again, or if they don't use it as much. And I actually think that this is a great time to build trust with your consumers, because, with so much disruption around, consumers have become very discerning. Earlier, nobody had the time. You know, you had to deliver a quick message. You had 20 seconds on YouTube or on TV to tell a user. But now, people are going through reviews. They're going through ratings. They want to read more content. They want to see how the service is being delivered. They're doing a lot more research to ascertain if a brand is actually delivering the promises it's making. And I think that's great for brands which are doing that, and not so good for brands which are not doing that. So I think one of the things we'll see in the short to medium term is that consumers become more discerning, and they spend more time making their purchase decisions. They go through more data, more content, more reviews. And if you have a great experience, consumers are talking about it to other consumers. But if you have a bad experience, then also they're talking about it, right? So I think that's just something to keep in mind.
Actually, the next question is quite in line with what you just said. Abhinav asks how to handle client rejection even when we do our best to provide the services.
I think this sort of old adage that the customer is king and the customer is always best is apt here. I think every aggrieved client, every client who has rejected you, every unhappy customer is actually a great opportunity, in my opinion, in building a long-term brand ambassador. Because sometimes if the service goes great, then great, it went great, right? That was expected. But if the service doesn't go great and the consumer is agitated, then how you treat that consumer, how you are able to recover that consumer, um, can really make or break that consumer. And sometimes it can convert that consumer into a brand loyalist for you, which would otherwise have taken longer. Not to say that therefore we should make mistakes and then recover consumers, but if you see the opportunity of recovering a consumer as an opportunity to create a long-term brand loyalist, uh, I think that's the best way to do it. And therefore, my view has always been consumers always right. Do whatever it takes to recover consumers. Go over and above, and generally it pays off rich dividends in the long run.
The next question is from Raghav Taneja, who asks, Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities are big markets for firms such as Urban Company, but still penetration there is quite low. What are your plans for such cities?
Um, so the reality is that tier two and tier three cities are not very big for urban company. In fact, urban company is only present in India in the top 18 cities, which are all tier one cities, and is not present in any tier two and tier three cities. I know that we, feel that tier two and tier three India has a lot of potential. It's a huge market. There's a lot of, built for Bharat and all of that, versus built for India that we talk about in the startup ecosystem. And some of that may very well be true. Um, at least as urban company, we have focused on tier one. And the reason is almost mathematical. Our view is that the services that we offer, and the price points at which we offer it, there's a basic household income above which only it's viable to serve, and that household income is typically above 10 lakhs. So you have to look at all the number of households which have income above 10 lakhs, and they're spread by different cities. And when you do that math, you realize that beyond the top 20 cities, the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Um, Puneet asks, because of COVID, we saw quite a few firms change their model and enter new verticals. For example, Zomato and Swiggy entered grocery delivery, etc. Is Urban Company also planning to enter new verticals or planning to aggressively target any new vertical?
Well, I think we've launched a few new verticals as well. We've launched a disinfection and sanitization service, which is doing very well. We've launched a variant of our cleaning. Earlier, we used to offer deep cleaning. Now we have an express cleaning service as well, which is a quick clean of your home or your office, because maids and domestic help is not available in many cities anymore. We're also experimenting with a few more new services. But at the same time, our focus continues to remain our core services, which is home repairs and maintenance and beauty services at home, and how we can make them safer and more viable for consumers to use.
The next question is, there was a time when the beauty sector was not considered as a potential to start. However, your good organization tapped into it and captured the market. COVID has affected this sector. How do you see the next 1 year for Urban Company?
I think COVID has definitely affected the beauty sector. Um, I see the sector as one which will have to undergo some very, very structural changes. And if I can talk about a few of those structural changes, I think one is, historically the beauty sector has been a you going to some place sector, right? So you go to a barber shop, you go to a salon, you go to a spa. That's the nature of the sector. There's a physical real estate, salon, barbershop, spa, and you go from your house there. I think the early trends in the last 5 years of the beauty service coming to you had already started. whether the haircut comes to your home or the beautician comes to your home or the masseuse comes to you. I think this will accelerate as a result of this pandemic. Um, Partly because people are spending more time at home and they want to get these things done at home, and partly because people will be uncomfortable stepping out and going to a salon or a barber shop. The home is still their own sort of controlled environment. Uh, the industry will shrink for in the short to medium term, but as it shrinks, the share will shift from going to a physical setup to the service actually coming to your home. That's one change. And therefore, I feel that salons and spas and barber shops have to embrace at home services. The second thing I think is there has to be a significant focus on hygiene and safety, which historically the industry has not focused on. Historically, this has been a very unorganized industry, very local, mom and pop. But all of them have to, for their own hygiene and their own safety, as well as that of their consumers, significantly invest in hygiene and safety. Some of those measures we've spoken about. And third, very, very importantly, this industry has remained, you know, apart from being local and fragmented, it has also not adopted digital and cashless in a very big way. The industry has historically, relied on walk-ins. Digital is not a big part of the industry. Taking digital orders is not a big part of the industry, and it's largely been a cash-driven industry. You know, with some to some extent trying to avoid taxation, etc., etc. I think all of that has to become history now. I think the industry has to move digital because otherwise you'll have walk-in consumers coming, you'll have congregation. That's not good for consumers. So they have to take digital bookings, and they have to move to online transactions. I think cash has to, just overall in our economy has to become history, but particularly in the beauty and wellness sector, I think it has to become history. So I think these are some structural changes that the industry has to undergo. I think it will be a trend which will formalize this industry in the long run a lot more. I think in the short run, the industry will undergo, some impact. It will reduce some not so competitive businesses will go out of business. But in the long run, I think this will be a trend in the right direction for the industry because it will propel the industry towards better health and hygiene standards. It will propel the industry towards digital. It will propel the industry towards cashless, and it will propel the industry towards services at home, which are far more viable than owning and operating a physical real estate setup.
Saurabh asks, there was news that there is a long waiting list to obtain services. I have two questions here. Do you see this demand coming from your existing customers, or do you find growth in new customers seeing the safety measures you are undertaking? And the second question is, how is your team getting ready to manage the demand?
Yeah, so I think this question is yeah, so I think this question is with respect to haircuts at home, where the demand is coming from both new and existing, and our team is onboarding barbers on a war footing. We are not able to meet this demand. I can tell you that for every order that we are serving right now in haircuts at home, we are saying no to 4 customers, which means if we had enough barbers, we could have done 5 times the number of orders that we are doing. We have already passed our pre COVID peak in haircuts at home, and we expect this to become, by the end of the year, one of the leading, if not the leading service on the marketplace. And this is where we had launched a waitlist, and that waitlist had run into tens of thousands of consumers. But now the service is live pretty much everywhere, with the exception of Mumbai and Pune.
So you're still working on meeting this increased demand?
Yes, yes. By onboarding
Not.
new barbers
Yeah.
and training them, we are working on meeting this. Absolutely.
Okay. Ishwar asks, what were the technical and financial difficulties that you faced before launching your startup? And how did you motivate yourself to convert your thoughts into action?
Well, I think every startup building journey is a journey of several challenges, um, be it financial, technical, or just personal in nature. As some of you may have read or may not have read, but my co-founder Varun and I had a failed startup before Urban Company. My third co-founder Raghav had done a separate startup of his own, which had also failed. There are multiple challenges that one faces even during the startup building journey, and this COVID is one such challenge as well, right? It's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenge that any of us will face in our business journeys, business build journeys. So I think, I see this as challenges are a core part of life. They're a core part of building a large company. You have to, over time, as an entrepreneur, have the ability to take the troughs with the same reception as the peaks. If, that's also the learning of entrepreneurship, right? And entrepreneurship makes you a better human being for many reasons. And one of those reasons is it teaches you how to, you know, it teaches you how to remain calm and composed and face, any challenge of life and any situation of life with the same thought process. Whether it's a crisis or it's a great peak. And the thought process usually is to focus on what's in your control and work on that, and to ignore what's not in your control, right? And that's been my thought process and my mantra over the last 6 years of building Urban Company, including in this crisis. You just focus on what's in your control, and try to maximize, and don't worry about what's not in your control.
We have a question that is, are you looking at expanding services like sanitization of house, etc., or is that included in the regular packages that you have?
No, we are looking at expanding service lines to these new services, and we have already launched sanitization and disinfection as a separate service.
Uh, Mahesh asks, what are the terms in the terms sheet we should be extra careful from a founder's perspective? And are there any points which need to be added for founders' interest protection?
Oh, this could take a very long time for me to answer. This is like a separate AMA in itself. But I think in large part, I think it's you know uh, few things to watch out for our liquidation preference. Um, you know what the liquidation preference looks like. That's definitely the first one. Hopefully, there are no onerous terms. Against founders. The investor is not asking you to sign up for something draconian. There are many others. I think what can be done as a separate exercise is that some of us, along with Startup India, create like a very basic standard term sheet, which we upload on the Startup India website, and sort of just that becomes sort of the gold standard for most investors and most companies to follow. I think Sequoia had also done this as a good practice earlier this year, where they had just uploaded their standard term sheet for everybody to review, and I thought it was a good and decent standard term sheet. If you Google it, you'll be able to find it. Um, but I think some of the more critical things to focus on are around liquidation preference, and any other onerous terms and things like you know need an exit in a certain period of time, need a certain return on the investment. Some of those are things to be watchful of.
The next question is generic to COVID. How do you find a good mentor or guide who can help you through your startup journey?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think it's very helpful to have mentors and guides who help you through the journey. Usually, I think they will come from your network. People you respect, fellow entrepreneurs who've been there and done that. But even if you don't have any mentors you can look up to in your own network, just reach out to people. I think, in my experience, startup entrepreneurs are more than happy to help out. Just reach out to people. Most of the successful entrepreneurs or somewhat successful entrepreneurs, their email addresses are readily available on the internet. Shoot them a note, ask for some time, be specific about where you need help. And I think then it's up to you, after you get that first meeting or that first phone call, how do you cultivate the relationship? I think that's one of the things that I've seen people not do enough. They don't spend enough time and energy to cultivate a relationship. I think any good mentor mentee relationship is a two-sided cultivation, and it's not just about trying to extract some advice or some knowledge from the other person. It's about building a long-term relationship. At the end of the day, you can't have like 15 or 20 mentors. That's also very important, right? Like, it's not like you're going to have, say, oh, I have such a laundry list of. If you have two good mentors who you can rely upon, that's a lot, and that's really good. If you have like three or four, that's great. I wouldn't advise anybody to have more than five really good mentors, because then you're wasting your time on building mentors versus actually running a business or doing whatever else that you do. So I think two, three, four, that's the right ballpark. But investing in those relationships is really important. So that over time they care for you as much as you care for them. You give them a call in the middle of the night, they'll pick up the call. That's really how many people will do that? That's the yardstick. Uh, I can think of just one or two people in sort of my life who I look up to. If I call it, facing a problem in the middle of the night, they'll pick up the call. Right? One of them is Kunal Behel of Snapdeal, who's also an angel investor. So I think something got to have that kind of a relationship.
I think the next question is very important. I personally appreciate the fund that you have launched for your gig workers. And Krishna asks, one great thing you did is taking care of your gig workers, service providers, in terms of their insurance. How are they responding to it, and are they willing to hit the grounds back?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I think we've done a lot for our gig workers, and it's not very well known in the market, everything we've done, because we also don't go and sort of tom about it everywhere. But just to give you a sense, like, the total sort of monetary package, if I could call it so, for supporting our gig workers since the lockdown started has been almost 20 crores, where we gave loans worth 8.5 crores. These were interest-free loans, 0% interest, with very, very delayed moratorium periods, um, and really no expectation of getting that money back. We gave 6.5 crores worth of direct cash transfers. We set up a relief fund worth 1.5 crores. We got insurance for everybody, and a bunch of whole other things, including investments in safety, etc., etc. All of that together was about 20 crores. We're committed to continuing to help out our partners. I think this financial year we will invest at least 20 to 25 crores in safety-related efforts alone. All our safety kits, our safety training programs, our investments in safety are, our investments. We don't charge money from service partners for those things. And I think the philosophy with which we've operated as a business is very simple, which is that tough times don't last, but the way you treat people in tough times is something that creates a lasting impression on them. They always remember how you treated them in the tough times. And for our business, that was really important, that we take care of our 27,000 service partners and we help them bounce back, because that will not just make them long-term loyalists of the company, but that word of mouth will spread to hundreds of thousands of service partners over time. And it's also the right thing to do. And one doesn't ever need any more reasons to do something than the fact that it's the right thing to do. So that's why we did it. And only time will tell. I think this financial year our profitability will not look that good, and these investments will mean that we are weaker off financially this year. But my view is that in the long run, these investments will pay off.
Thank you, Abhiraj. I think this is something that everyone watching us should take away on how you treat people in the times of adversity. Um, The next question is quite similar. What kind of employee wellness programs has Urban Company introduced to ensure they feel motivated? And what is your larger marketing strategy for the lockdown?
Yeah, so I think I've talked about what we've done for our gig workers. I'll talk about now what we've done for our internal employees. So lots of simple things, right? Like, we honored all the job offers that we made. In fact, during the lockdowns, we've had more than 130 people join the company full time. We haven't let go of anyone for reasons of lockdown. There have been few people who've been asked to leave, but those were no performance related reasons. We haven't cut a single dime of anybody's salary. And we've done a lot around employee morale. We've had more than 30 or 40 external leaders come and talk as part of a series that we call Josh Talks. These have included leaders from the corporate world, from startup ecosystem, from the military, even some actors and actresses. We've launched an entire series of training efforts called the Urban Academy, where we train all our employees on different skills, ranging from technical skills like coding and Excel to softer skills like leadership, how to present your ideas better, etc., etc. We've you know we are giving every single employee the opportunity to work from home for as long as they want, right? Like, I'm in office, but 90-95% of my team is working from home, and it's basically up to every individual. Nobody's asking you to come to office. If you want to work from home, just work from home. We have removed any caps on sick leaves for the whole of 2020. So typically, every organization has a certain limit on the sick leaves that they have. We have basically, for the whole of 2020, said that there'll be no cap on the sick leaves. You can have infinite sick leaves. Like this, there are many things that we've done to keep the morale going. Um, I think we realize that as I mentioned earlier, it's not just a business crisis, it's also a humanitarian crisis. And therefore, standing by our team members, just like we stood by our service professionals, standing by our team members is equally important.
These are all the questions, Abhiraj, that we had received until yesterday from our audience. Gautam, could you please place the questions that we have received right now from the live audience? I think,
Yeah, so
Abhiraj,
this
you
is the
would.
question. Yeah. So
Yeah,
the
it's
question
one
is,
founder. Yeah.
yeah, one founder versus two or three. I think, generally speaking, I would say having a co-founder is good because it helps, brainstorm. It makes the journey easier. You share the good times with somebody else. In the tough times, you have somebody else's shoulder to rely on. So my general advice and rule of thumb would be that having co-founders, or at least one co-founder, is a good idea.
Next question, Gautam.
So the question is around AI. The question is, how do we use AI in urban company, and if adoption of new technologies like AI will take a hit in India as revenues decline and costs are cut. So we use, the broader domain of AI and machine learning in many things in the company. From technology, from sort of the whole capacity and matchmaking engine that we have, which decides how many orders to take, which service professional to send, to we also have very intelligent systems to make sure that there's no identity mismatch if somebody else was assigned and some other service professional went, and so on and so forth. So a lot of our back end technology leverages both AI and ML. On your larger point, in fraud we use a lot of these things. On your larger question around will investments decrease, not really. I think I think good businesses will continue to invest in new technologies, will continue to want to reduce their human dependency. I actually think the investments in AI, machine learning, or even simple things like automation for, let's say, the manufacturing setup. If anything, this crisis will teach us that it's important to do those things because every business at some level has to employ people, but at the end of the day, has to become efficient and therefore reduce its dependency on human beings. And we've seen that in this crisis, right? So I think some of that can only come through investments in technology. And there is a reality that technology investment, like let's say automating, you have any manufacturing setup has the choice using machines or man, right? It's always a fundamental debate. I won't get into that debate right now. It'll take one more AMA. But I think broadly speaking, I actually think the smarter business owners will accelerate their investments in technology, even as they look at cutting costs, because technology is not a cost; it's a revenue driver, and that's the mindset you have to operate with. Like if you think of technology as a cost element in your balance, like P&L, then that's the mindset, right? That's always going to you know be the mindset of your company. But I think all great companies don't think of it that way. They think of technology and investments in technology as a core driver of revenue versus a cost driver. So the question is, the gentleman Bharat is an advertising based independent content producer. How do you see advertising of your services being affected in terms of short term and long term projections? Can you quantify that? Also, you are doing wonderful in terms of providing services in such times. More power to you. Thank you so much, Bharat. Um, I think advertising, how will it change? Again, I think fundamentally this pandemic will accelerate what was anyways going to happen. And I think that's a very important distinction I want to make. I think human behavior takes time to change, and therefore it's unlikely that new behaviors can get inculcated, but behaviors which are anyways going to change over a long period of time can get accelerated. So one of the thesis around advertising that I have, and lots of people disagree, is newspaper and TV advertising is going to reduce and digital advertising is going to increase. And the simple reason for that is if you just look at the amount of time you spend on a single day on your smartphone versus the time you spend watching TV or reading the newspaper, and how that time has changed over the last few years, it becomes extremely clear to you the direction in which advertising is going. Um, and that's a one-way direction. It's not like due to some reason we will start reading more newspapers again, or due to some reason we will start watching more TV again. If you watch TV, we'll watch more Netflix, and Hotstar, and Amazon Prime versus watching traditional broadcasting channels. Because why should I watch what the broadcaster wants to show? I should watch what I want to watch, right? So I want to have the power in my hands. That direction is a secular trend. The pandemic is only going to accelerate it. And therefore, my advice to people who are in traditional advertising businesses, which are focused on more TV and newspaper advertising, and if you're a content producer or a content creator for those mediums, I would strongly encourage you to focus your energy into creating content for basically the new mediums, which is Facebook, YouTube, uh, TikTok, etc., etc., etc. So many new platforms which have not yet come up. You're watching me on one such medium, right? Unlikely that you're watching me on TV. So yeah. Why the name Urban Clap was changed to Urban
Just change
Company?
to urban company.
You know, you can Google that. There's a very long and beautiful answer that my brand team has articulated. It's there in lots of our press releases and newspaper articles online. It has something to do with brand architecture and long-term brand this and that, etc., etc. Most of that I don't remember. At that time, I had memorized it well and delivered it really well in the brand relaunch event that we had done. Uh, the real reason I think is as we went international, you know, clap. If you can Google the word clap and all the connotations that it has, and it has a negative connotation in some international markets. So we wanted to have a name that has much more universal appeal. So good question. The question is really around how do you ensure quality, especially if the services are delivered by third party. And I think this question is sort of this view that only first party can deliver quality and third party can't. I think I basically want to challenge that view, right? I think quality is first and foremost delivered if there is alignment of incentives. If the service professional has no incentive to deliver quality, they won't. And actually, in first party services, that's the nature because you get a fixed salary regardless of how hard you work and what your ratings are. So your incentives aren't necessarily aligned with the incentives of the customer. On our platform, the incentives are aligned. If you do a bad job, you get a poor rating, you get thrown out of the platform. If you do a good job, you get a better rating, you get more orders, you do better, you earn more. It's very beautiful alignment of everybody's incentives. It actually drives the most amount of change. And what we've seen is, and that's why we work with individuals. We don't work with like small businesses and SMBs because there, then the owner of the business pockets all the margins, and the actual plumber or beautician who's going doesn't get that benefit. So on our platform, every professional is a micro entrepreneur. The harder they work, the more money they make, the better their ratings, the more money they make. And that is one of the most fundamental drivers of quality. Beyond that, there are certain core investments we make as a company into technology, into training, into controlling the supply chain of products, into safety. And those investments also drive significant quality controls. And then everything is about standardization at scale, right? Like if you want to drive quality at scale, you have to standardize your product or your service. And so a big focus for us is around standardization. Yeah. So the next question is, how do you know who's the best co-founder in an idea stage startup? That's a difficult one to answer. I mean, I think this is more art than science. This is about judgment. This is about trust. It's about you know knowing sort of who's the right person to. But I think the simplest way to put it is, a, do you want to work with this person for the next 8, 10, 12 years? Because this is marriage. This is not dating, right? So you choose a co-founder who you really trust. B, do you respect each other? you know is it someone you respect for their skills but also their judgment, for their integrity? um, and C, is there alignment on the vision of what you're trying to build and the motivations of why you're trying to do you both have the same long-term vision, and is there alignment of that? I think if those two three things fall into place, then I would go ahead with whoever. Whether it's one of the most difficult things to do to find the right co-founder, um, and it's a lot more art than it is science.
Thank you, Abhiraj. I think these are all the questions that we can take up in an hour. Thank you for answering these with such patience, in such detail, with such candor. And actually, so many of these questions even I had for like whenever I have booked for a plumbing service, for a cleaning service, for a beauty service in at odd hours in the morning before my office hours. They've always turned up in time, and I always used to wonder like how do you incentivize them for this to maintain the quality of these services. So actually, a lot of my questions answered too. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to give some closing remarks before we end this session,
No, I
which
think
has been
thank
a
you
great.
very much for yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to speak with everybody. I wish everybody all the best. I think we all need to stay strong and work hard to sort of bring India back to its growth path. And really, I think Winston Churchill had said, uh, never waste a good crisis, because there's so much opportunity in every good crisis. So never let a good crisis go to waste. And that's what I would say to all my entrepreneurial friends. There's a lot of opportunity in this crisis. So stay strong, work hard, remain focused and passionate, remain patient. It will take time to end, but I'm sure if you sort of stick it out, you will emerge as a much more resilient business, and more importantly, a much more resilient individual on the other side of this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhiraj. As you can see, there would be an email ID displayed on the screen. So if any of you have more questions, you can send it us at that and we'd address these. Thank you.